Just be careful. A few more steps.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Happy anniversary, baby.
Oh.
My love for you is like a butterfly. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I want to ride that.
Good morning, everyone. I want to ride that. Okay, so this is a typical example of some sort of English humor that probably doesn't work everywhere. Probably why we haven't completely aired this this ad as it was intended. But it's a good example of designing a marketing stunt that actually talks to one specific audience. So yes, I'm Jean-Marc. I'm in Paris. I'm the French one. Age before beauty. Vlad will take care of all of the complex messages about audience management in the second part of this, but he's done all the work, so credit to him. Good. So yeah, there are multiple ways of actually tailoring your audience. We found this on the internet. We thought it was kind of fun. You can probably don't read everything, but for example, you see that you can either divide Europe into poor people or rich people, or the one that I really like is 18, is people who need a plumber, and then the people that can actually fix their own sink. And I think it's the message with this is that segmentation you can find everywhere, right? I mean, the rich and poor is a simple one because these are basically the people that will actually pay for your games and the people that would just play for free. There is some truth in that, but the message is you really have to dig really deeper to try to see what segmentation will work. And obviously this is all not what we're using for Wargaming as a disclaimer. We're slightly more sophisticated than that, as you will see. So this section is called One Size Doesn't Fit All for a reason, because at the beginning of any game, and Wargaming with World of Tank was no exception, you pick up all the enthusiasts and the early adopters, and you get those guys. But if you want your game to last, which I believe our game has been lasting for more than 7 years, then you have to be really starting segmenting your audience and understanding what makes them happy, right? Because otherwise you're a fluke, you go up and down, and then you become like a nice memory. We have the ambition to be a lot more than a nice memory. Some people say that, well, our game is becoming a lifestyle for certain of our core audience, and I believe it's true. So, how do you do that? First of all, the one insight for World of Tank is that the one segmentation that worked for us is a historical one, right? It's the number of tank battles that happen in real life. And in fact, when you look at where our game is strong and not so strong, it's completely correlated to that. So once you've got that, it just draws the conclusion that you don't have to work very hard if you want to work on the East aspect of things, because historically people get it, right? They had tanks in their garden, their grandparents told them about that, so they're naturally interested about it. But try to attract the UK audience that's got limited tank battles, or Spain or Italy, then you have to become a lot more creative. So in terms of creation, if you're looking at other industry, we're not the only one faced with that. If you look at movies, for example, and the way people are marketing movies, you would see that in the West, we tend to have a single hero person, where in the East, sorry, we tend to bring up the cloud or the group of people. And then even visually, in the West, we like things that are very, very clean and detailed and simple, where in the East, you tend to need to be perceived as being very, very busy. So that's on the movie side. In games, you even have games that are very completely different games with same names, but you see again that the visuals also need to accomplish this element of simplicity in the West, where in the East or in China in particular, you need to show crowds. So these are things that you learn over time. Shopping, this is JCPenney. In the West, in North America, for example, you need to stock them high and show that it's abundance, where in the UK, in the East, you just have to have simple and clear messages. The reasons why I'm mentioning those is because you have to really tailor your message to your audience, and for that you need to have this local knowledge around what makes your audience tick. One example we did find from our team came up with Netflix. You know, this is Stranger Things. This is the actual visual that you have for Turkey. And in Turkey, when you look at the trailer, you know, it's very little resemblance to any other trailers that you've got anywhere else in the world, specifically in North America. They have this old singer that resonates very well with the audience in the 80s because the action is happening in the 80s, as you know, in Stranger Things. And they've really pushed the whole concept to tailoring, and by doing that, they've made Stranger Things a massive success in Turkey. So here's an interesting one. So that's all I had to say about general, and then we're just going to move. But I don't think you'll recognize the man, but Vlad is here.
Hello everyone, and thanks for welcoming us in this lovely city of Prague. Taking over from Jean-Marc is never easy because it's very entertaining, and my part is less entertaining and a lot more about the numbers and boring stuff. Anyway, a bit of history how we got from one size fits all into some sort of diversified strategies and operating across multiple geographies, segments, and channels. So in 2011, WorldOfTanks was successfully launched in Europe, immediately attracting a massive amount of players, specifically in the geographies that Jean-Marc illustrated before. In 2012, we did our first segmentation study to identify our key customer profiles in the external audience. To be more specific, we identified people like, middle-aged militaria, senior historian, young gunner. They referred to our key demographic segments and categories and interest groups. In 2014, we looked with our brilliant data science team, once we got a few years worth of data, we looked into our in-game segmentation, and we saw our actual whales and dominators, our casual players, our social players. That brought these kind of like one-size-doesn't-fit-all mindset into CRM strategies. And all these retrospectives, like looking at past years and the past behavior, was executed mostly through channels like email and Facebook, while in 2016 we got into the client with a brilliant platform team and the PRMP, which stands for Player Relationship Management Platform, and that changed our operation a lot with the integration of real-time rule engine. So ever since, this is our main channel and the most effective channel of communication. So up until today, we've been gaining experience and generating results through permanent testing, exploring data, interacting with different segments, communities, testing on small cohorts, and scaling the samples. So the path is probably not unique for Wargaming, but still wanted to share that as an intro. So to resonate with what Jean-Marc was saying, live operations in WorldOfTanks Europe can be classified into global, so everything that is coming from the game itself. So this is more about the game, the game updates, new content. Global events, usually super big, like New Year or Halloween. Regional events is everything which is kind of like pan-European. So starting from pan-European holidays, such as Christmas in most of the European countries, or like commemoration days, and sales and premium offers. Then local, this is something that we are trying to explore massively these days, is everything that relates to a specific country. So that can be, or even like a city or sub-region in some cases. As an example, you can have a Bastille Day in France, super big. 14th of July, for your information, or a Czech Independence Day, which is happening quite soon, end of this month. And those events are super big for those communities, but not necessarily for Europe overall. So as a part of our local events, we kind of try to fix as well some of the discrepancies generated by different purchasing power and different like economical conditions. So this is kind of obvious that the difference in income itself, they impact a lot the player spending and as a result their experience. So a Serbian whale, for example, is quite different from a German whale, while they have the same kind of like ambition to consume content and to purchase. So we address that with the different price elasticity tests and things like that. Same actually goes for the specific countries themselves. So Germany in the northeast isn't quite the same as Bavaria and stuff. So we were actually pretty far from claiming that we have a perfect recipe for that, but we are moving slowly in that direction. And one last level is personal. So regardless of the nation, regardless of the geographical position, regardless of the player segment, we, knowing all the past behavior of the player, we know also pretty well how this behavior is going to evolve in the future. So with the help of our data scientists, we can predict pretty accurately if the player is likely to churn, if the player is likely to monetize or not, and we can activate different strategy on that. I think that we have people in this room who are going to be talking about that tomorrow in a more like extensive way. So anyway, so this is a kind of framework that we use to do that. So if a person is likely to churn, our strategy there is to activate a sort of like a retention thing. If the player hasn't monetized yet, but not at risk of churn, then we need to look at the programs that would kind of facilitate the first payment experience, and then so on and so forth, like payment reactivation, app selling, and stuff. So that kind of creates a holistic player profile, which is very easy to scale across different products, different similar games, and different regions, because we're essentially talking about the same things. We're talking the numbers kind of replace the creative aspects behind. Measurement. So in our way at Wargaming, measurement was super important. As you may guess, we have done a long way from measuring campaigns by direct attribution or a funnel to actually measuring impact on the behavior, which is quite important. So funnel becomes quite obsolete if everyone can see the message that you're sending. So in the case of if you communicate on the client, this is essentially the case. Clicks are important, but can be easily manipulated. So in a way, like if you message 90% discount on something super important, you'll get a lot of clicks, but not necessarily good results. So only interactions leading to positive shifts in the player behavior can be considered as successful. So in our practice, we analyze the stuff in kind of like 360 view. So we look at the impact on the revenue, on the engagement, on the battles, on conversions, on players, and on the payers, and the number of active days. So we we call a successful campaign as the ones that impacts positively something but doesn't hurt the rest. So in the example right here, you can see a monetization campaign with no negative impact on the activity and no impact on gold spend. So now you may think it's pretty easy, yeah? So you've got your product, which is good. You got the data, you get the users, you got the dashboard. Machine learning is done. So, but actually, something that one of the biggest insight that we got is probably you won't succeed with your audience management right now. Why? Because it has to make sense for the player. And making emotions count is probably the most important ingredient in this recipe. It's a very crucial step in the deployment of Word of Thanks audience management. So, first of all, player has to understand why as a player, I have to understand why I'm getting a certain offer. It doesn't have to be a sort of like a specific mechanic. I don't have to necessarily understand that there is a certain set of actions that I need to do to get it, but I need to understand at least like why I got it, that my friend didn't get it, so because the community is shared and stuff. So second and most important is something that is proven by many behavioral economists. People at a high emotional and the moral state are much more likely to react to marketing. And this is, here is an example of a campaign that we are running to congratulate players with an epic achievement in the game. The picture is well customized for European users, and this is one of the very good successful examples of our campaigns. You can see the impact of emotions. This is actually the actual results on the monetization of this campaign. Again, it has been proven by many behavioral economists, so this is kind of our contribution to the to this field of studies. So it goes far above of the control group, and overall, pretty good impact. Last but not least, so we have the richness of data, we have the speed of data, we have numbers of segments, geos, strategies, and all that kind of amplifies and raises the complexity. We got 550 million events that we track per day, 3 terabytes worth of data, about 40K events that we track per second from battles or finance or activities on the websites to which we can react. And then that all through quick analysis empowers the real-time communications. But as I said, that also increases the complexity and the questions, the obvious questions that we face in every day, like what are we doing with that? Because where to start and where to go on. And that brings us to a very important point that relates to the people management and the process management in this area, is that in essence, to be able to cover all the possible segments and constantly innovate with offers, you need to set up a fast iteration and testing process. So we test multiple hypotheses, we iterate around post-campaign analysis on a monthly cadence for us specifically. Then we scale successful cases across regions, sometimes across products. And having this bandwidth to test is super important because on average, 85% of campaigns that go down the drain, they're not successful. Meaning that they either have to go back to the iteration phase or be just discarded overall. So, meaning they don't show any significant or positive result. So, and that brings us to wrap up with the kind of key takeaways. So, on our side, what has worked, what hasn't worked? So, extensive market research, surveys, community feedback, refine and inform our understanding of the market, the language to pick in our communication. Marc showed great examples of how other successful companies are doing that. We're doing that as well, constantly iterating and trying to be more adapted to the player. Then the high level of complexity of data, variety of segments, and all the machine learning that require flexible processes in operations to be able to test and scale. In that case, machine learning is super helpful for us to define the common structure and the common language and get the unbiased views. So for the countries themselves, culture and economy impact a lot the performance. So this is something that as a regional publisher we consider quite a lot. And well, and then yeah, the key message is that having spent 8 years on the market, the only thing that we have that we can be sure of right now is that one size doesn't fit all. And yeah, that's it. Any questions, please?
Thank you so much for the presentation. Now we have some time for questions and answers. So, the audience, it's up to you to ask the questions now.
did manage to put you to sleep completely. Excellent.
My helper will give you a microphone. Just a second. Do we have a second mic?
What was the question?
Hi, thank you for the talk. It was really good. So my question has to do with something you said at the end, Vlad, about the 85% fail rate. I wouldn't categorize it that way necessarily, but perhaps some would, and I guess that's the core of my question. So I know that in my experience, sometimes executives or C-suite folks see something like that and have a little heart attack, yeah? And I'm just wondering, I'm coming from a different industry, web development, and I'm wondering, is it something that within games or within your studio, executives are more accepting and understanding of that iterational model, or is the 85% considered something to improve?
So, well, to be fair about that, when we started, it was not 85%. So some of the first campaigns that were kind of obvious, they were obviously successful. So that kind of let us build a stable flow of positive energy in terms of revenue and engagement coming in, and that kind of let us experiment. And once you experiment, but with a safe kind of like background, you have the backup of the management on that. So we kind of understand that these 85% of unsuccessful stuff that feed the 50%, the 15% of the successful ones. So yeah.
Thank you very much. I thought it was really good insights. My question is about specifically about the pricing that you said, different pricing per different regions, and it kind of like ties also into like community management. Is there any backlash that you see if like one community pays less because of the different price points for different countries? Well, I would imagine that in Germany you pay more, like in, for example, in Brazil. Do you see that people react to that, or do you have any countermeasures so that it's not happening, that you don't get any problems?
To be entirely fair, the prices that you see on most of our shops, on the premium shops, they are pretty much similar across all the regions and countries. So where the different pricing strategy comes into action is actually with the discounting more than with the actual pricing. So I'd rather say that the more careful approach towards community there would be to discount rather steeper the countries with a lower purchasing power, but keeping the front page the same.
So the 85% unsuccessful rate or 15% success rate, does that vary across countries? Do you have some countries where you get it, or is it pretty much across the board?
No, it's pretty much the same.
Right, okay. All right, thanks.
Hi, thank you for the sharing. And I have maybe more tough question, because you told what you are doing. Could you share how much you improved the KPI by this, even the percentage, like the lifetime value or day 30?
Well, it is below 10%. This is what I can share, but it's significant in absolute numbers if you take the big products like that.
Mm-hmm. And how many people are working on this in your team?
We have about 5 people working directly in Europe, and we have a lot of people working on the back side, on the platform side, on the BI side. And so it is a big machine,
okay.
Well oiled as well.
Thank you.
Please, questions to Jean-Marc as well.
This is working fine.
Great presentation. Appreciate it. What's the typical size of those experiments that you do in terms of relative size to your audience?
So we stick to, as a general rule of thumb, to 10K with a 10% of control group. So that lets us see at least some statistical significance if there is something. But then if we see that the effect is not there, like, or is not significant, but we have a good feedback and things like that, we may consider increasing the size. So there is no limits up to that. I mean, the limit is your audience, right? But this is more like an ad hoc thing.
Just gonna, as there's no other question, I'm just gonna connect a couple of your questions, which is around the failure rate of 85% fail. Oh my God, from a management perspective, and what we've said around also our penetration in our market. Even though we're an 8-year game, we still believe we're in infancy, and we're very far from having penetrated our potential. And if we didn't do all those 85% of fail, it probably means we're not trying hard enough. And I think for us, this kind of it was new in our culture. That to accept that failing was good. Now we're failing, but we're failing in small numbers, right? They're tests, but this whole approach of testing a lot and only picking up the 15% that work, that's how you get to this additional 2, 3, 4% of penetration in the key markets. And that's what made us, we've invested a lot in this area because we believe that's what's going to give a longer tail to our game. If you gain 2, 3 years of audience in a game like World of Tank, it enables you to bridge to the next big game that comes up, and that's exactly what we're doing in Paris. Pretty sure the next question is going to be for you.
In the regional, global, and local efforts, do you have a sense of how much energy you put behind each of those three, and has that transitioned over time? Is regional like a phase you've gone through, or is regional is still a substantial amount of our efforts?
Right. It's very hard. It's very hard to put a number on the global effort because this is a lot of people working on the game itself. So it's more than a half of the return, for sure. And then the regional stuff is the big piece as well. Well, local is being, the 5% of the added value.
Okay, thanks.
Does anybody else have any questions? No.
First of all, great stuff, guys. Thank you so much for sharing. I wish you spent the full hour talking. I think that stuff is golden and deserves a big audience. But my question is somewhat boring and managerial. Could you please talk a bit more about the process behind the campaigns? Because each campaign is really complex. There's the hypothesis, there's the messaging, the targeting, the marketing assets, the delivery. I'm really curious about how it originates, what kind of checkpoints it passes before it becomes something you actually deliver.
Right, so we, specifically about the process, so as I said, we iterate monthly. So every beginning of the month, to be specific, we kind of come up with a massive list of things that are obviously a result of either a brainstorm or the previous tasks that need to be revisited. And then we go through prioritization. So there is a certain bandwidth that we can support to ensure the appropriate quality and stuff. So everything that goes within this bandwidth goes to the plan, which is then approved and reviewed by the global teams, by the product teams, and to make sure that we are not, doing crazy stuff. And the rest is going into our backlog, and then will be revisited over the next month. So it's more or less that.
So in the beginning, it's a group effort with a bunch of people.
It is a group effort, yes, indeed.
Thank you.
Actually, to that point, something that is pretty cool, and I think that we managed to build is also we kind of managed on the monthly basis to collect this area of opinion from different functions. So there is a BI perspective, right, on those things, how to use the models and stuff. There is a product perspective, there is a marketing perspective, and there is probably some, a community manager that is passing by with a genius idea, and it can all go into that backlog, if I can say.
Hi.
Hello. Question for Jean-Marc, right?
Yeah. So there was this thing, making emotions count, and that made me a little bit curious that do do you sell more on the loss or on the win? Can you comment anything around that thing?
So I'll start and then hand over to the specialist. This emotional connection that comes from a long series of reviews. I mean, in other industries we call that moment of truth. You're right. It's choosing this moment when it's exactly the right time to make work. So gaming has not invented anything here, right? I mean, since the beginning of sociology and marketing, that was that. And as far as knowing whether or not it works better on, so World of Tank is a game where you lose a lot. So if you only count on the moments when you win, there's not a lot. So we tend to occupy many of those. But do you have any specific answer to win-lose, which works best?
Based on our experiments, winning is better. Yeah, but as Marc said, yes, you lose a lot, and a constant strike of losses is also an emotion, but it should be approached differently, obviously, like with a different type of offer and stuff like that. If you lose a lot, you might get angry. It doesn't really help in buying things and purchasing things, unless you're a weird type of personality, which we cannot yet identify.
It's a segment. I'm sure it's a segment of people that like beating themselves over the head. But I come from service initially, and when I joined Wargaming, one of the first things we looked at is this streak of a streak of loss of 7 or 8 losses. Might actually trigger you to get a mail to say, hey, you've been playing this T-67 very unsuccessfully for 7 battles in a row. Why don't we just push you a tutorial about a video, user-generated content or our own content that I would actually help you understand how to aim correctly and penetrate a tank in a certain sort. And we're starting to do that. So a lot of the work that Vlad and his team do are around essentially monetization and audience management, maintaining the audience as high as possible. But there's a whole other application to that exactly same use of BI for service, and it's also a way of maintaining and engage our community. Yeah. So it's not only about money. Well, ultimately it is about money, but not direct money. And it looks like you guys are ready for the second coffee of the morning.
Sorry, not yet. I have a question from my side.
From the internet.
Okay, so my question is about the decision making. How you evaluate when a campaign is a lose or it's a winning campaign? So what are the things that you take into consideration that you decide that it went bad, it went good?
There's a slide for that.
I even have a slide for you. So this is it. So we look at the angles that we consider interesting for us. So the angles of monetization, obviously, of engagement, of retention, of conversions, and everything that impacts positively and significantly one thing and doesn't hurt the other thing is good. Everything that impacts one thing positively and impacts negatively the other thing, here we need to see what is more important. This is not that clear. But more or less, this is kind of the tool for decision making of keep or kill. Cool, thank you. Yes, and and the control group, of course. So the similar people who didn't receive the same treatment. Thank you very much.